Final question. You mentioned a couple of 100,000 people who sent in petitions on health care, talking about health care. You also have more than 200,000 who petitioned the White House calling on President Trump to release his full tax returns with all information needed to verify emoluments clause compliance. Whenever 100,000 petition, that triggers a White House response. So what is the White House response?
The White House response is that he's not going to release his tax returns. We litigated this all through the election. People didn't care. They voted for him. And let me make this very clear. Most Americans are very focused on what their tax returns will look like while President Trump is in office, not what his look like.
Donald Trump refuses to release his tax returns.
Nobody cares about it except some of the folks in the media. Nobody cares about it.
Trump claims he can't release any of his returns while under routine audit, even as the IRS has made clear there's no legal requirement for Trump to withhold them.
Just so you understand, I'm under audit, a routine audit, and when the audit's complete, I'll release my returns.
And even as Trump's own lawyers note, the IRS review of his 2002 through 2008 returns is complete. Even his own running mate, Mike Pence, preparing to release his taxes this week.
So I'll give mine to you all this week, and he's going to provide his after a routine audit is done.
Despite Trump's contention, a series of polls show voters do, in fact, care about Trump's tax returns.
Type of taxable income that he has, whether it's ordinary income or capital gains income. Voters could also learn how much a candidate has given to charity.
A CNN review of Trump's available financial documents show 4 potential areas that may shed light on Trump's reluctance. Take Trump's charitable giving. An extensive Washington Post review of Trump's personal charitable donations has raised major questions of what Trump has actually given, despite Trump's bold claims to the contrary.
This is my check for $1 million.
Or take Trump's tax rate, an issue that dogged the Republican Party's 2012 nominee for months. Trump has made clear, as a businessman, he's done everything in his power not to pay more tax than necessary.
I pay as little as possible. I use every single thing in the book.
But Trump's involvement with real estate raises the very real possibility he pays nothing at all, according to tax experts.
An obvious benefit is that a taxpayer who owns property, real estate, a building, can trade that property for another building. And as long as that property is going to be used for investment purposes or in business, the taxpayer won't pay tax on the gain at all.
In fact, CNN has identified at least 3 years, 1978, 1979, and 1984, where he definitively paid $0 in federal income tax. Documents show another 2 years, 1991 and 1993, where Trump likely paid little to no income tax as well. And when asked about it during the campaign, he's been hardly forthcoming.
What is your tax rate?
It's none of your business.
Then there's the issue of Trump's total net worth. Now, to be clear, a few years of tax returns wouldn't shed light on whether Trump is actually worth the $10+ billion he claims. But it would show Trump's net income and adjusted gross income, providing more detailed insight than the financial disclosure form filed by Trump in May. But perhaps most importantly for Trump's opponents, a detailed release of Trump's returns would provide a window into Trump's business connections.
Maybe he doesn't want people to see that he's got some connections.
Trump's own lawyers making it clear that Trump is the, quote, sole or principal owner in approximately 500 separate entities. Those entities engage in hundreds of transactions, deals, and new enterprises every year.
Doesn't want his tax returns out there.
Help us understand why.
There's 4, I think, broad categories. The easiest one is obviously income. You're going to see how robust the Trump organization actually is. I think secondarily, you're going to see whether or not he's a generous philanthropist. He's made much hay on the campaign trail of being a big supporter of vets and other charitable causes. And the real numbers around his philanthropic giving is going to come in the tax returns. He's gone after U.S. corporations about operating overseas at the expense of the American worker. We know a lot of the Trump organization entities operate themselves overseas. So how much of his income comes in from offshore operations? And I think most importantly, the tax returns will show what financial and business influence or pressures could come to bear on him in the Oval Office.
Of those 4, is there any specific one that you think is the real smoking gun for Donald? I mean, if it's truly just a bravado thing, he doesn't make as much money as he said, Come on.
But that's not a bravado thing with him. You know, remember when he announced for the presidency, he said, you know, I'm worth $8.7 billion. That magically jumped to $10 billion a month later. He's floated humongous numbers about his net worth out there for years because it's how he gains traction with a voter who thinks that Donald Trump is their ideal of the rich guy.